Okay, so we've got a pretty interesting pile here. Looks like articles, some notes you've jotted down, even
Mm.
some highlighted sections from a book. And it seems like the common thread running through all of this is, well, making your business more profitable.
Yeah, looks like you're really serious about turning that, what did you call that, cash-eating monster into a money-making machine.
Yeah, those were your words, not mine. But hey, who doesn't want a business that actually makes money, right?
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to try to pull out the really essential strategies, the core of what can help you make that transformation happen.
And looking through everything you sent over, the name that keeps popping up is Mike Michalowicz, specifically his book Profit First. We'll be working mostly from the 2017 edition, which actually expands on the original from, let me see, 2014.
So not just some flash in the pan idea.
Yeah. Right. It's got some staying power. In fact, the Library of Congress even has it all cataloged under, well, business finance, legit stuff. And the main problem it tackles, the thing Mihalowicz really goes after, is something I'm sure you're familiar with. It's a pretty common struggle for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and the book doesn't sugarcoat it either. Starts right off with a pretty stark statistic. Says something like half of all new businesses, they just don't make it past the 5-year mark.
5 years, that's it. Gone. But even the ones that do manage to survive, well, a lot of times the owners are left feeling, just totally drained. They're buried in debt. It's like they're working for the business, not the other way around.
Totally. And McCullovitz, he actually uses this great analogy. He talks about feeling like Dr. Frankenstein at one point.
Mhm.
His creation, his business had just gotten completely out of control. I bet you can relate to that on some level, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a pretty common feeling. And, you highlighted a really important part in your notes. It was about this kind of aha moment Mikalovich had, something about his daughter's piggy bank.
Yeah, it seems kind of random, but
Right. But it actually ended up being this huge turning point for him. He realized, sometimes the simplest things can reveal the most profound truths. Cash is king, absolutely essential. But it's more than that. It's that profit can't just be this, like, hopeful outcome you cross your fingers for. It has to be baked right into your business plan from the very beginning. It's got to be a habit, not an afterthought.
so profit as a proactive choice, not a lucky break.
I like that. And the book actually provides this really handy tool to kind of figure out where your business stands right now, financially speaking. It's called the Profit First Instant Assessment.
Ah, yes. And I remember you mentioned someone named, was it Debbie Horovich?
Yeah,
She had a pretty strong reaction to this assessment thing.
she did. I mean, she'd been running her business for like a decade, 10 years. And when she did the assessment, it really laid bare some tough realities. I think her exact words were, "I'm a fool."
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. It is.
Yeah.
But it shows how, sometimes having that clear financial picture, even if it's kind of painful to look at first, can be a total game changer. It makes you face the truth head on.
For sure. No more hiding from the numbers. All right, so let's get into the real meat of this profit first thing. At its core, it's about a pretty simple but really powerful shift in how we think about a basic business equation. The one we all learned. Sales minus expenses equals profit.
Sales minus expenses equals profit. Yep.
Yeah, it's like ingrained in us. But Michaelovich, he flips this whole thing around. His formula is sales minus profit equals expenses.
Huh. Sales minus profit equals expenses.
Mhm.
So it's just like rearranging the terms.
Exactly. But that little tweak, that subtle change, it actually changes everything about how you approach your finances. The key principle here is that you take your profit first, right off the top, with every single sale. It's not what's left over. It's the first thing you account for.
Okay, so it's like changing your financial behavior at a really fundamental level. It's not just about crunching numbers differently. It's about shifting your mindset. You actually mentioned a great analogy in your notes here, something about using smaller plates to help with weight loss. What was that about?
Oh, yeah, that. It's a perfect illustration of how a small change can make a big difference. Think about it. When you've got a big plate in front of you, the natural instinct is to fill it up, right? And then you end up eating everything that's there. Trying to consciously eat less from a full plate, that's willpower, and it's tough to maintain.
Oh, I know that struggle.
Right. But what if you just used a smaller plate from the start? You still fill it up, but now there's less food overall. So you end up eating less without even really trying. It's about leveraging your existing habits, not fighting them.
So it's about setting yourself up for success. And, this ties in with another really interesting concept that came up in your research. It's called Parkinson's Law. Sounds kind of complicated, but
Oh, it's not as complex as it sounds. The basic idea is that work expands to fill the time you allow for it. And the crazy thing is, this applies perfectly to money, too. The more money you have just sitting around, the more you're going to find ways to spend it.
Like if you've got a full tube of toothpaste,
You squeeze it out like there's no tomorrow, but if you're down to the last little bit,
you become a toothpaste conservation expert.
exactly, you make it last. So this profit-first approach, it's kind of like intentionally creating the almost empty tube situation for your operating expenses. By taking your profit out first, you're limiting what's available to spend, which forces you to be more careful, more resourceful.
So necessity becomes the mother of invention, but for your business finances. I like that. Now, you mentioned that there are 4 core principles to this whole profit-first system. What's the first one?
All right, principle number 1 is serve sequentially. What this means is every time money comes into your business, a sale, a payment, whatever you allocate it to different accounts in a very specific order.
Like a pecking order for your cash?
Precisely. So first comes profit, then owner's comp, short for owner's compensation, then tax, and finally OPEX, which is short for operating expenses.
So profit, owner's comp, tax, and then finally operating expenses.
And a super important point here. You only pay your bills with what's in your OPEX account. No dipping into your profit or tax money, no matter how tempting it might be when those invoices start piling up.
Oh, I can see how that would be tempting, especially when you're starting out maybe a little tight on cash. It was so easy to just pay the bills first and hope there's some profit left over.
Oh, I know, right? But McCullough says if there's not enough in your OPEX to cover your bills, it's a sign that you need to cut expenses, not raid your other accounts. That leads us right into the second principle, which is remove temptation.
So this is where those separate no temptation bank accounts come in. And I have to say, your notes about Peter Laughter and his approach to this were hilarious. Asking his bank manager for the most inconvenient withdrawal options possible, that's dedication.
Right. I mean, the guy was serious about making that profit hard to get to, and that's the point, right? You want to create some friction between you and that money. So the ideal setup is to have your profit hold and your tax hold accounts, and these are savings accounts, by the way, at a completely different bank from your main operating accounts.
Like a crosstown, different bank, the whole works.
The more inconvenient, the better. It's not about making it impossible to access the money if there's a real emergency, but it's about putting a speed bump in the way of those impulsive, I need to buy this now urges. If it's easy to grab, it's easy to spend.
Out of sight, out of mind, financially speaking. Love it. Okay, so we've got serve sequentially, remove temptation. What's the third principle?
All right, number 3 is enforce a rhythm. This is about creating predictable, consistent financial habits. It's not about just randomly moving money around whenever you feel like it.
So it's like setting a schedule for your money management.
Exactly. The book recommends doing your allocations, moving money from your income account to your profit, owner's comp, tax, and OPEX accounts, and paying your bills twice a month, specifically on the 10th and the 25th.
The 10th and the 25th. Got it.
Now, this might seem a bit arbitrary, but having those set dates makes a huge difference. It forces you to be more proactive about managing your cash flow. You're not just reacting to whatever bills happen to be due that day. And, in your research, you came across that story about...
Deborah Corright, the bookkeeper.
Yeah, her. She's a big advocate for this consistent schedule. And she says, if you get to one of those dates and you realize you don't have enough in your OPEX account to cover your essential bills, it's a huge red flag. It means your expenses are out of control and you need to take action immediately.
So it's a built-in accountability system. I like that. Okay, before we get into principle number 4, let's back up a bit. We've talked about these different accounts: income, profit, owner's comp, tax, OPEX, then the separate profit hold and tax hold accounts. It's a lot to keep track of. How does someone actually get started setting all of this up?
It might seem like a lot, but it's actually pretty straightforward. First things first. You're going to open 5 checking accounts at your main bank. These are for your day-to-day operations. One is your income account, where all the money comes in. Then you have separate checking accounts for profit, owner's comp, tax, and OPEX.
5 checking accounts at your main bank. Check. And then what about those separate no temptation accounts?
Right. Those go at a different bank, one you've never used before. You'll open 2 savings accounts there, one for profit hold and one for tax hold. Now, here's the key. You link these savings accounts to their corresponding checking accounts at your main bank.
So I can easily transfer money between them, but they're not right there in my face all the time.
Exactly. It's just enough friction to make you think twice before dipping into those funds. Okay, so now you've got all your accounts set up, 7 in total. What's the very first thing you should do?
Besides celebrate getting through all that paperwork.
Good point. Well, Mikhailovich recommends starting with a small but super important step. Every time you get a deposit in your income account, you immediately transfer 1% of that amount over to your profit account.
Just 1%.
Yep, just 1%. It's a tiny amount. You probably won't even notice it's gone. But the psychology behind it is powerful. If you can run your business on, let's say, $1,000 of a deposit, you can definitely run it on $990. And seeing that profit start to accumulate, even if it's just a few bucks at first, it proves to yourself that the system works. It builds confidence.
It's like starting a new workout routine with just 5 minutes a day. You build momentum from there. Now, speaking of building good habits, you mentioned something about an envelope system in your notes. Can you explain that?
Oh, yeah, that's a great analogy. Mikhailovich talks about how his mom used to manage her money using envelopes. She'd get her paycheck, then she'd physically divide it up and put the cash into different envelopes labeled for things like groceries, rent, savings, whatever. Each envelope had its specific purpose.
Like a physical budgeting system.
Exactly. And that's what Profit First is, in essence. It's like a digital, more sophisticated version of that envelope system. Each account is like an envelope, and you're making sure the money goes where it's supposed to go.
So those separate no temptation accounts, they're like the savings envelope that you try really hard not to touch.
Precisely. Okay, so let's say you've got your accounts set up and you're ready to really dive into this. The next step is to get a clear picture of your current financial situation. You're going to use a tool called the Profit First Instant Assessment Form. You can find it in the book.
Assessment form, got it. What is this thing? Tell me.
Well, it walks you through figuring out your real revenue. And this is important because it's not the same as your total sales.
Huh. Okay. So what's the difference?
Real revenue is what you have left after you subtract your direct material and subcontractor costs from your total revenue. It's the income your business actually has more control over.
So if I'm a real estate agent who brought in $5 million in sales, but I paid out $4 million in agent commissions, my real revenue is actually just $1 million.
Exactly. That's the money the business itself is working with. Same goes for, let's say, a staffing firm. They might bill out $3 million, but if they're paying $2.5 million to their subcontractors, their real revenue is only $500,000. It's about understanding the true financial picture.
Okay, so I've got my real revenue figured out. What's next?
Next, you're going to calculate your actual percentages. This is where you look back at the last 12 months of your business activity and figure out what percentage of your real revenue went to profit, owner's comp, tax, and operating expenses.
So it's like a financial report card for my business.
Exactly. And this is where it can get really real, because the book says any profit you claim has to be actually sitting in a bank account labeled as profit, or it has to have been paid out to you as a bonus on top of your regular salary. If it went to pay down debt or you kind of just mentally reinvested it without a clear plan, it doesn't count. It has to be real, tangible profit.
Oh, or fuzzy math. Okay, so after I've got my real revenue and my actual percentages figured out, what then?
Then the book introduces what are called target allocation percentages, or TAPs for short. These are basically benchmark percentages for each of those categories: profit, owner's comp, tax, and OPEX, based on different ranges of real revenue.
So it's like if your business is making this much, these are the percentages you should be aiming for.
Exactly. But here's the important thing. TAPs are aspirational. They're not your starting point. They're your long-term goals. You're going to gradually work your way towards those ideal percentages.
Okay, so TAPs are the long-term targets. But what about right now when I'm just starting to implement this profit-first system? What percentages should I be using?
Those are called your current allocation percentages, or CCAPs. This is where you take your actual percentages from those past 12 months and you make some initial adjustment.
Okay, so how do I adjust them?
Well, the book recommends a pretty simple starting point. You add 1% to your day, 0 percentages for profit, owner's comp, and tax, and then you reduce your OPEX percentage by 3%. This creates a small but immediate shift towards prioritizing profit.
Small steps, big results.
Yeah.
I can get behind that. All right, so let's say I've figured out my CAPs. What do I actually do with them when money comes into the business?
This is where the magic happens. When you get a deposit in your income account, you immediately divide it up and transfer the money to your other accounts: profit, owner's comp, tax, and OPEX based on your CAPs.
Okay, walk me through an example. Let's say I just got a $2,000 deposit.
Okay, so $2,000 hits your income account. Now let's say your CAPs are 1% for profit, 5% for owner's comp, 1% for tax, and 93% for OPEX.
So 1%, 5%, 1%, 93%.
Right. So you would immediately transfer $20 to your profit account, $100 to owner's comp, $20 to tax, And the remaining $1,860 would go to your OPEX account to cover your operating expenses.
Wow. So that's how much is going to operating expenses right off the bat. That's a big chunk.
It is. And the book emphasizes that seeing that big OPEX percentage can be a real wake-up call. It motivates you to start looking for ways to cut expenses, which is the very next step in the Profit First process. Week 1, cut expenses.
So right after I allocate the money, I start looking for ways to trim the fat.
Absolutely. Michaelevich says most businesses can easily cut 10–20% of their operating expenses almost immediately without even breaking a sweat.
What are some examples of easy cuts?
It could be things like software subscriptions you're not using, unnecessary office space, maybe even streamlining some of your processes. And yeah, sometimes it means taking a hard look at stacking levels. I know, it's a tough one.
For sure. Nobody wants to let people go.
But sometimes it's necessary for the long-term health of the business. And the idea is that by cutting expenses, you're freeing up cash flow much faster than you could by trying to increase sales.
Working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Got it. And then we stick to that twice-a-month rhythm for allocating the money and paying bills,
Okay.
the 10th and the 25th.
Exactly. Those dates become your financial anchor points. And remember, you're only using the money in your OPEX account to pay bills. If it's not there, you've got to adjust your expenses. No cheating.
No rating the other accounts. I'm getting the picture. Now, what about that money that's starting to build up in the profit account? Does it just sit there forever?
Nope. This is the fun part. Every quarter, on the first day of the new quarter, January 1st, April 1st, and so on, you take 50% of whatever's in your profit account as a distribution to the owners. The other 50% stays in the account as a reserve.
So it's a reward for all the hard work, but it's also a way to build up some savings.
Right, exactly. And this is important. That profit you take out, it shouldn't just go back into covering expenses. It needs to be truly separated from the business.
No reinvesting just to keep things afloat.
Right. Taking that profit out, it's a sign that your business can actually support itself, that it's truly profitable. And if there are multiple owners, you divide up the profit distribution based on their ownership percentages.
So everyone gets their fair share.
Yeah.
I like it. Now, you mentioned that there are some more advanced profit-first techniques. Like once you've got the basics down, you can take things to the next level.
Oh, yeah. There's a whole chapter in the book about that.
Right.
It talks about setting up even more specialized accounts for different purposes. There's a vault account for long-term savings and unexpected expenses, a stocking account for things like inventory purchases, even an equipment account to save up for big purchases down the road. It's about getting really granular with your cash flow management.
So like fine-tuning your financial engine. And, you know, another thing that caught my eye in your notes was this idea of finding hidden money within your business.
Ah, yes. This is all about efficiency. The book tells this story about a box truck company that was determined to cut costs. They challenged themselves to reduce expenses by 1/3, and they actually ended up cutting them almost in half by making their trucks more efficient and optimizing their routes.
That's amazing.
It is. It shows that there's often more money hiding in your business than you think. You just have to actively look for it.
So it's like that 2 times the results with half the effort principle, doing more with less. You know, you keep bringing up that toothpaste analogy.
It's just so perfect. Remember, the small tube forces you to be more mindful about each squeeze. And that's what focusing on efficiency does for your business. You get more out of every dollar you spend.
It's not just about increasing sales, it's about making the most of the revenue you already have. And another key aspect of that is being really strategic about who you work with. In fact, I think it was the book, The Pumpkin Plan, that talked about firing bad clients.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. Not all clients are created equal, right?
Yeah.
Some of them, they're just energy vampires. They're demanding. They pay late. They constantly nickel and dime you. And even if they're bringing in some revenue, they might actually be costing you money in the long run.
You're dragging you down.
Exactly. So sometimes the best thing you can do for your business and your sanity is to let those bad clients go. It frees up your time and energy to focus on the clients who truly value what you do. It's about quality over quantity, for sure.
And that ties into the whole Pareto principle, right? The 80-20 rule.
Exactly. Figure out which 20% of your clients and offerings are generating 80% of your profit and focus your energy there. Now, here's a big question a lot of business owners have. What about debt? If you're already carrying a lot of debt, how do you even begin to implement profit first?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, right? Like, shouldn't you be throwing everything you have at that debt?
That's what most people think, but the book actually addresses this head on. It says that even if you're in debt, It's crucial to start building that profit first habit while you're paying it down. You have to break the cycle of just focusing on top line growth and ignoring profitability, because that's often how you end up with more debt in the first place.
So it's about creating a solid foundation even as you're digging out of a hole.
Right. So the book recommends this approach called the 991 rule. It means that when you do your profit distribution, 99% of that profit goes straight towards paying down your debt.
And the other 1%.
That's your reward. It's a tiny percentage, but it's psychologically important. It reinforces the habit, even though most of the money is going towards debt reduction. It's like a little pat on the back for staying the course.
Makes sense. And along with that, there's this idea of a debt freeze. What's that all about?
This is about getting really serious about reducing expenses. It's about cutting out all unnecessary recurring payments and really trimming down your essential operating expenses, your monthly nut, as they call it.
So basically, tighten the belt as much as possible to free up cash flow.
Yeah, it might mean some tough choices in the short term, but it's all about getting to that long-term financial freedom faster. And, one area where a lot of businesses can find some extra cash is staffing. The book actually references the E-Myth Revisited here.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah.
About the transition from working in the business to working on the business.
Exactly. And in a lot of small businesses, especially the ones that are overstaffed, the owner ends up being the most underutilized person. They're bogged down in day-to-day stuff instead of focusing on the big picture.
They become the chief bottle washer instead of the CEO.
Right. And as you start implementing profit first and you get a clearer picture of your true profitability, you might realize that you've got more people than you actually need.
Which leads to the dreaded L word, layoffs.
Yeah, it's never easy, but sometimes it's necessary. And the key is to do it strategically, focusing on roles that aren't essential or where performance is lacking.
So, making those tough choices for the greater good of the business. It's not fun, but it's part of being a responsible owner. Now, are there any less drastic ways to free up some cash?
Absolutely. The book has this great little technique called just one more day. Basically, before you buy anything that's not absolutely essential, you force yourself to wait 24 hours. And more often than not, that impulse to buy just kind of fades away.
Resisting that instant gratification. I like that.
Another thing you can do is negotiate with all your vendors, rent, utilities, supplies, everything. Even small reductions here and there can add up to big savings over time. It's all about being proactive and not being afraid to ask for a better deal.
Always be closing, but on a lower price.
Yeah.
You mentioned a story in your notes about a baseball team, the Savannah Bananas.
Oh man, they're a great example of what happens when you combine profit-first thinking with a focus on value. The owner, Jesse Cole, took these two struggling baseball teams and turned them into a phenomenon by creating an incredible fan experience. It was all about entertainment, having fun, and that in turn led to sold-out stadiums and even helped them wipe out their debt.
So they basically innovated their way to profitability. Love it.
Mhm.
And it seems like the overarching theme here is the power of small, consistent actions. It's not about making these huge, sweeping changes overnight. It's about taking small steps and sticking with them.
Exactly. Just like that Dave Ramsey debt snowball method, you focus on paying off the smallest debts first to build momentum and stay motivated. And of course, while you're doing all this, you've got to have that debt freeze in place. No new debt while you're paying down the old stuff.
No more digging the hole deeper. Got it. So all of this ultimately leads to what the book calls the profit-first life. What does that actually look like for a business owner?
Well, the ultimate goal is financial freedom. It's about being able to make choices based on what you want, what you value, not just what you can afford. The book tells this story about two guys, Jorge and Jose, who started implementing profit first. And at first, their big goal was just to finally be able to take vacations without stressing about money.
So like a tangible reward for all their hard work.
Exactly. But then, as their businesses became more profitable, their goals changed. They started thinking about things like securing their family's future, maybe pursuing passions outside of their businesses. It's about having options.
Yeah, it's about more than just the money. It's about what the money allows you to do.
Exactly. And the book even talks about how to manage things like credit cards responsibly within the profit first framework. Like you start paying down your balance, you gradually reduce your credit limit. It's all about building good habits and creating financial security.
So it's a holistic approach to your finances, not just your business finances.
Right. And one thing that really resonated with me was the emphasis on mindset. The author talks about how he deliberately cut back on his own personal expenses. And he realized that, all that fancy stuff, the expensive cars, the memberships to exclusive clubs, it didn't really make him any happier. It was just stuff.
So it's about finding true contentment, not just chasing material possessions.
Exactly. And the book actually recommends this really interesting idea. It's called locking in your lifestyle. Basically, you decide on a level of spending that feels comfortable and sustainable for you, and you commit to not increasing it significantly for, say, 5 years.
So even as your business grows, you resist the urge to upgrade your lifestyle right away.
Right. It allows you to accumulate cash so much faster, and you can reach that financial freedom goal much sooner. And then after that initial lock-in period, the book introduces what's called the wedge system. It's a way to gradually and thoughtfully increase your spending as your income grows, but in a controlled way that doesn't sabotage your progress.
So it's like you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor, but you do it responsibly. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but before we wrap up, I think it's important to talk about some of the common mistakes people make when they try to implement profit first, the pitfalls to avoid.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The book has a whole chapter dedicated to that. And, the biggest enemy of profit first is often ourselves, our own lack of discipline.
We're our own worst enemies. Story of my life.
Right. And some of the common mistakes include allocating too much profit too soon based on overly optimistic projections, cutting the wrong types of costs, raiding that tax account when things get tight, and focusing too much on growth without first establishing a solid foundation of profitability.
So it's about being realistic, being disciplined, and focusing on the fundamentals. No shortcuts.
Exactly. And one of the biggest things you can do to set yourself up for success is to find some accountability. Don't try to do this alone. The book shares this great anecdote about a food waste challenge at a summer camp.
Food waste challenge at summer camp.
Yeah, it sounds random, but it illustrates this principle perfectly. They were having a problem with kids wasting food, so they decided to track it and make each cabin accountable for how much they threw away. And guess what? The amount of food waste plummeted.
So peer pressure can be a powerful tool for good.
It totally can. And it's the same with profit first. Having someone to check in with, whether it's a business coach, a mentor, or even just a friend who's also committed to the system, can make a huge difference in staying on track.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've covered a ton of information here, but I think the key takeaway is this. Profit first. It's not just about crunching numbers. It's about changing your mindset and building a business that truly serves you, both financially and personally.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's about creating a business that's a source of joy and abundance, not stress and struggle.
So to you, our listener, who brought us this amazing material, you've already taken a huge first step just by exploring this concept. Now the question is, what small, consistent action are you going to commit to taking today to start implementing profit first in your own business?
What one small step will move you closer to turning that cash-eating monster into the money-making machine you dream of? It's about taking control, making profit a priority, and building a business that supports the life you want to live.
Because ultimately, profitability isn't just about a number on a spreadsheet. It's about creating a business that gives you freedom, flexibility, and the ability to pursue your passions. It's about building a business that works for you, not the other way around.